The alarm sound cut through space like a knife through silence. Deep in the heart of the Galactic Council chambers, Speaker Veltar watched his crystal body shake as the emergency message played on the big screens around them. The images were terrible. New Haven, a peaceful world where the gentle Zephyrian people lived, was on fire. Veltar had seen many wars in his long life, but nothing like this. The footage showed cities that had stood for thousands of years now burning. Families running through streets as dark shapes moved overhead. Children crying as their parents carried them toward escape ships that might never come. Ambassador Thexani floated nearby, her gas-like body changing colors as she spoke. 12 whole star systems, she said, her voice full of fear. Gone. All of them. The Vraktar swarm takes everything. They don't just want our planets or our resources. They want our minds. Our thoughts. Our very souls. The other council members sat quiet, but Veltar could feel their terror. These were beings from the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. They had technology that could move planets and weapons that could crack moons in half. But none of it worked against the swarm. The Vraktar were different from any enemy they had faced before. They were not just one species but a collective mind that absorbed other beings. When they attacked a world, they didn't just kill the people living there. They took them alive, connected them to their hive mind, and made them part of the swarm. Every person they captured made them stronger and smarter. Elder Mordak, the oldest member of the council, spoke without moving his mouth. His words appeared directly in their minds through telepathy. Our best warships, he said sadly, they mean nothing to these creatures. The Vraktar learn from every battle. They adapt to our weapons faster than we can build new ones. It was true. The Council had sent their finest battle fleets to stop the swarm. Ships with energy shields that could stop asteroid impacts. Laser cannons that could cut through solid metal like paper. Particle beams that could destroy anything they touched. But the Vraktar had absorbed it all. Literally absorbed it. Their bioships had somehow learned to eat energy itself. What about those new members? Mordak asked, his mental voice growing even quieter. The ones from the dangerous world. The Deathworlders. Several council members made sounds of disgust. You mean the humans? Asked one. From Sol 3. That death trap of a planet? Veltar remembered when Earth had first asked to join the Galactic Council 3 years ago. Most members had laughed. The humans still used chemical rockets to travel between planets. Their weapons were primitive metal projectiles. Their world was classified as Class 12 hazardous, meaning it was barely suitable for life. Earth had gravity that was twice as strong as most civilized worlds. Its sun pumped out dangerous radiation. The planet had violent weather, poisonous plants, and animals that existed only to kill other animals. Most council species needed special suits just to visit the surface without dying. Their technology is centuries behind ours, said another member. What could they possibly do that we cannot? But Veltar was desperate. The Vraktar were moving faster now, consuming entire worlds in weeks instead of months. At this rate, they would reach the council homeworlds within a year. Maybe less. The speaker looked at the burning images of New Haven one more time. Somewhere in those flames, millions of innocent beings were waiting for help that might never come. Their own people, their own children, could be next. Send the message, Veltar said finally, his crystal form growing dim with worry. Contact Earth. Ask for their help. The other council members stared at him. They thought he had lost his mind. But Veltar knew something they didn't. Sometimes, when you're facing impossible odds, you need someone crazy enough to try the impossible. Earth was a world that had created life in conditions that would kill most beings in the galaxy. If anyone could find a way to fight an enemy that seemed unstoppable, it might be the creatures tough enough to survive on such a nightmare planet. The transmission beam reached out across the galaxy toward a small blue world orbiting a yellow star. A world where beings lived who had never known peace, who had spent their entire history fighting each other and their own deadly environment. The message was simple: help us. Please. Admiral Jake Morrison had been staring at the alien message for hours. The command center of Luna Station buzzed with activity around him, but his eyes stayed locked on the holographic display showing the distress call from across the galaxy. The images were fuzzy and broken up, but he could see enough to understand what was happening. Cities were burning. Not just burning like in a regular war, but being eaten alive by ships that looked more like giant insects than spacecraft. These weren't metal vessels with clean lines and glowing engines. They were organic things that pulsed and breathed and moved like living creatures. And they were destroying entire worlds. Morrison watched families running through streets that had once been safe. He saw children being carried by parents who knew they might not make it to the evacuation ships. The alien beings in the footage looked peaceful, almost fragile. They had never been built for war, and now they were facing something that seemed unstoppable. "Sir," said Colonel Beth Williams, walking up to him with a tablet in her hands. "The diplomatic corps has reviewed the transmission. They're recommending we follow standard protocols for this kind of situation." Morrison didn't look away from the screen. "What kind of protocols?" "Well, first we need to form a committee to study the request. Then we need impact studies to see how helping might affect Earth's resources. After that, we have budget hearings to decide how much we can spend. Then we need to get approval from the United Nations, the Planetary Defense Council, and about 6 other organizations." Morrison finally turned to look at her. "How long would all that take?" Williams checked her tablet. "If we rush it? Maybe 6 months. More likely 8 to 10 months before we could send any real help." 6 months. Morrison looked back at the burning cities on his screen. "Beth, those people will be dead in 6 weeks. Maybe less." The Admiral had spent 30 years in the military. He had fought in the war that freed Mars from Earth's control. He had seen combat in the asteroid belt and helped defend the outer colonies from pirates. He knew what war looked like, and he knew what happened when good people waited too long to help innocent victims. Morrison turned to face his command staff. "Prep the Third Fleet for immediate deployment. Full combat loadout. I want every ship armed and ready to fight." Captain Randy Mitchell, who commanded the destroyer Vigilant, was already pulling up star charts on his tablet. "Sir, we're looking at a 17 light-year journey. That's further than we've ever sent a combat fleet. Our fastest ships could make it in about 3 weeks if we pushed the fusion drives to maximum power. Will the engines handle it?" Mitchell nodded. "They'll hold together. Might need rebuilding when we get back, but they'll get us there. Do it." Morrison's voice had the tone of a man who had made hard decisions before. "And tell Colonel Davis to prep his Marines. Get them loaded with every weapon we have. Something tells me we're going to need soldiers on the ground, not just ships in space." Around the command center, officers began moving with purpose. They had trained for this their whole careers, even if they never expected to use that training to help aliens they had never met. But that was what humans did. When someone called for help, they answered. Lieutenant Amy Johnson was monitoring communications. "Sir, I'm getting calls from the diplomatic corps. They want to know what we're doing. The Secretary General is asking why we haven't waited for authorization." Morrison looked out the window at the stars. Somewhere out there, millions of innocent beings were dying while Earth's politicians argued about proper procedures. "Tell them we'll explain later." "Sir, what if they court-martial you for this? What if they say you violated the peace treaty with the Galactic Council?" Morrison had thought about that. By sending military ships without permission, he was breaking humanity's first major agreement with alien civilizations. It could end his career. It could start a diplomatic crisis. But when he looked at those burning cities, none of that mattered. "Amy, my grandfather once told me something. He said the only thing necessary for evil to win is for good people to do nothing. Those creatures out there are evil. They're destroying entire civilizations. And we have the power to stop them. The alarm klaxons began wailing across Luna Station as ships powered up and crews ran to their positions. In the next few hours, humanity would launch its largest military operation in history. They were going to war against an enemy they had never seen, to save people they had never met, on worlds they had never visited. It was also humanity's first major violation of galactic law. But Morrison knew something that the politicians back on Earth didn't understand. Sometimes doing the right thing meant breaking the rules. And sometimes, asking for forgiveness was better than asking for permission. The Vigilant came out of hyperspace like a bullet fired from a gun. Captain Randy Bradley felt his stomach lurch as the ship's engines cut off and they coasted into normal space. What he saw through the view screen made his blood run cold. New Haven was dying. The planet that had once been green and blue like Earth was now covered in dark scars. Massive ships, each one the size of New York City, hung over the surface like vultures. They weren't made of metal like human ships. These things looked alive, with skin that pulsed and breathed. They had tendrils hanging down from their bellies, and those tendrils were digging into the planet like straws, sucking up everything they could find. Jesus Christ, whispered Lieutenant Amy Johnson from her position at the sensor station. Her face had gone white as she read the numbers on her screen. Captain, there's got to be 1 million of those things down there. Maybe more. Bradley studied the tactical display in front of him. The enemy ships moved like they were all connected, turning and diving in perfect formation. Their hulls glowed with a sickly green light, and he could see smaller vessels darting between them like insects. But these smaller ships weren't attacking anything. They were hurting. Down on the planet's surface, crowds of refugees ran through burning cities. The small alien ships flew overhead, using some kind of energy beams to guide the fleeing people toward collection points. It looked exactly like cattle herders driving livestock into pens for slaughter. "Sir," called out Communications Officer Dave Wilson from across the bridge, "we're getting a transmission from the surface. It's weak, but I can make it out. Put it through." The voice that came through the speakers was filled with terror and hope mixed together. The translator made it sound human, but Bradley knew he was hearing an alien speak words no being should have to say. "Unknown ships, this is Elder Morketh of New Haven. We see you in orbit above us. Please, if you are here to help, we need you now. The harvesters are taking our people. They're taking our children. We don't know who you are, but please help us." Bradley looked around his bridge at his crew. These were good people who had signed up to protect Earth and its colonies. None of them had ever expected to fight aliens to save other aliens. But when he saw the determination in their eyes, he knew they were ready. "Wilson, send them a message. Tell them the cavalry has arrived." The captain turned to his weapons officer. "Johnson, power up the railguns. Full charge." Lieutenant Amy Johnson's hands flew over her controls. "Sir, all batteries are online. Tungsten rod ammunition loaded. We have 36 shots before we need to reload." Bradley watched as the enemy ships continued their terrible work. The Vraktar had been fighting other civilizations for who knows how long. They had learned to defend against laser weapons and energy shields and all the fancy technology that advanced aliens used in space combat. But they had never fought humans before. Human weapons were different. Instead of using energy beams or particle rays, human warships used kinetic weapons. Simple metal rods fired at incredible speeds. It was basic physics turned into a weapon of war. Take a piece of tungsten, accelerate it to 30% of light speed, and let physics do the rest. "Target the lead harvester," Bradley ordered. "Fire when ready." The railgun spoke with a sound like thunder. In space, there was no air to carry sound, but the vibration traveled through the ship's hull. Every person on the bridge felt it in their bones. The tungsten rod covered the distance to the enemy ship in less than a second. It hit the organic hull with the force of a small nuclear bomb. The massive harvester ship, which had been slowly draining the life from New Haven, simply disappeared in a flash of light and debris. The other Vraktar ships stopped moving. For a moment, everything was quiet. These creatures had absorbed the knowledge and technology of dozens of civilizations. They had adapted to every weapon and defense system they had encountered. But nothing in their collective memory had prepared them for this. "All ships," Bradley broadcast to the approaching human fleet, his voice filled with grim satisfaction, "welcome to pest control. Time to show these bugs what Deathworlders do to bullies." The rest of the human fleet dropped out of hyperspace around New Haven. Destroyers, cruisers, and even converted cargo ships armed with makeshift weapons. They weren't the most advanced ships in the galaxy, but they were crewed by humans who had grown up on a world that tried to kill them every single day. The Vraktar were about to learn why Earth was classified as a Class 12 hazardous world. And why the beings that survived there were called Deathworlders. General Lisa Rodriguez stood on the bridge of her flagship Defiance, watching the battle unfold on dozens of screens around her. She had commanded troops in the Mars Rebellion, the asteroid mining wars, and the Jupiter colony crisis. But nothing in her 30-year military career had prepared her for fighting an enemy like this. The Vraktar weren't just alien ships with different technology. They were a hive mind, millions of absorbed beings all thinking as one massive brain. Every ship, every weapon, every soldier moved in perfect coordination. It was like fighting a single organism the size of a solar system. "Ma'am," called out Major Rick Thompson from the communications station, "we're getting reports from the Intrepid. Colonel Mitchell's Marines have successfully boarded one of their bioships." Rodriguez turned her attention to the tactical display. The Intrepid was a heavy cruiser that had managed to get close enough to one of the smaller Vraktar vessels to launch boarding pods. It was an insanely dangerous move that no other galactic civilization would have attempted. "What's their status?" Thompson listened to his earpiece for a moment. "Ma'am, Colonel Mitchell reports that her team has secured what appears to be the ship's nerve center. The entire vessel has gone dead in space." This was the breakthrough they had been waiting for. Dr. Kevin Park's xenobiology team had been studying captured Vraktar technology for weeks. They had discovered something that other alien civilizations had missed. The enemy ships weren't just controlled by living computers. They were living computers. Each vessel was essentially a massive organism with a brain that controlled everything. Most advanced civilizations fought space battles by targeting engines and weapons systems. They used precision strikes to disable specific parts of enemy ships. But humans had a simpler approach. Find the brain and kill it. "How many Marines did we lose?" Rodriguez asked. "Surprisingly few, ma'am. Turns out these bioships have immune systems designed to fight off diseases and parasites, not armed soldiers with assault rifles." Rodriguez nodded. It made sense. The Vraktar had been absorbing other civilizations for thousands of years, but most of those civilizations were peaceful. They had never faced an enemy that would actually board their ships and fight hand-to-hand in the corridors. Captain Jennifer Walsh looked up from the logistics station. "General, I have an update on our ship conversions. We now have 43 civilian transports armed with kinetic launchers. The Zephyrian refugees are actually volunteering to help load ammunition. This was humanity's secret weapon, and it wasn't really a weapon at all. It was creativity. When humans went to war, everything became a weapon. Civilian mining ships that normally dug up asteroids were fitted with missile launchers. Cargo haulers were packed with explosives and turned into guided bombs. Even the space stations orbiting New Haven had been converted into massive gun platforms. The alien refugees had been amazed watching humans work. Within days of arriving at New Haven, the human fleet had transformed every piece of available technology into something that could fight. Mining lasers became ship weapons. Construction robots became bomb delivery systems. Even the communications satellites had been turned into surveillance networks to track enemy movements. "Ma'am," said Commander Paul Anderson from the intelligence station, we've intercepted more of their communication signals. Dr. Park thinks we're starting to understand how their hive mind works. Rodriguez walked over to Anderson's station. On his screen was a complex diagram showing connected nodes and information flows. Explain it to me. Well, man, imagine if every person on Earth was connected to the same internet, and they all shared the same thoughts instantly. That's basically what we're fighting. When one Vraktar ship learns something, they all learn it immediately. That sounds like a huge advantage for them. Anderson smiled. That's what we thought too. But Dr. Park realized something interesting. Because they're all connected, they all think the same way. They can adapt to new threats, but they adapt as one mind. We adapt as millions of individual minds. Rodriguez was starting to understand. So when they figure out a counter to one of our tactics, we've already invented 3 new tactics to replace it. They think like a single genius, but we think like a million different people all trying different approaches. It was true. In just the past week, Rodriguez had watched human forces develop new strategies almost hourly. When the Vraktar learned to defend against railgun attacks, human engineers invented cluster munitions. When the enemy adapted to boarding parties, human pilots started ramming damaged ships directly into biovessels. When the Vraktar began avoiding close combat, humans turned asteroids into kinetic weapons. The hive mind was incredibly intelligent, but it was still just one intelligence. Humanity was millions of intelligences all working together but thinking independently. Every human commander could come up with ideas that the others had never considered. General, Anderson continued, Dr. Park believes he's found their main weakness. The hive-mind connection that makes them so coordinated also makes them vulnerable. If we can disrupt their communication network, their whole system falls apart, Rodriguez finished. Anderson nodded. Exactly. They become millions of individual organisms with no way to coordinate. Dr. Park thinks he can create a signal that will jam their network, but we'd need to get close to their main communication hub. Rodriguez looked at the tactical display showing the ongoing battle. Human ships were holding their own, but barely. The Vraktar were learning from every engagement, developing new defenses and attack patterns. They needed to end this war soon, before the enemy adapted completely to human tactics. Where is this communication hub? She asked. Anderson pointed to a massive structure on the edge of the system. It was 10 times larger than any ship they had seen so far. There, man. Dr. Park calls it the nest ship. That's where the main hive mind intelligence is located. Rodriguez studied the massive vessel. Getting close enough to jam their communications would require sacrificing most of the fleet. But if they succeeded, they could win this war and save not just New Haven, but every other world the Vraktar might target. Start planning the mission, she ordered. We're going to cut the head off this snake. The nest ship filled the entire view screen of the Vigilant, and Captain Randy Bradley had to force himself to keep looking at it. The thing was massive beyond imagination, easily the size of Earth's moon, but it wasn't made of rock and metal. It was alive. The entire surface pulsed like a giant heart, covered in veins that glowed with sickly light. This wasn't just a ship or a space station. This was a living world that housed the combined minds of 1 billion stolen souls. Bradley could feel his crew's fear through the bridge. They had all volunteered for this mission, knowing they probably wouldn't survive. But looking at that monstrosity, the reality of what they were facing hit home. Somewhere inside that thing were the absorbed consciousness of every being the Vraktar had ever captured. Millions of civilizations, all trapped in one collective nightmare. Operation Prometheus is a go, Admiral Morrison's voice crackled over the communication system. Even through the static, Bradley could hear the weight in the Admiral's words. All ships, this is our moment. Everything we've fought for comes down to the next hour. Make it count. Dr. Kevin Park's plan was brilliant in its simplicity. He had taken a common Earth virus, something as basic as the flu, and modified it to attack the neural pathways that connected the hive mind. It was like using a computer virus to crash a network, except this network was made of living brain tissue. The beauty of the plan was that the Vraktar would never see it coming. They had absorbed the knowledge of countless advanced civilizations, but all of those civilizations had moved beyond biological warfare thousands of years ago. They used energy weapons and particle beams and other clean technologies. Only humans still remembered how deadly simple biology could be. But there was a catch. The virus had to be delivered directly into the nest ship's core, into the central brain that controlled the entire hive mind. And that core was protected by defenses that had already destroyed half the human fleet. "Sir," said Lieutenant Amy Johnson from the sensor station, her voice steady despite the odds, "I'm reading massive energy buildups all around the nest ship." "They know we're coming." Bradley nodded. Of course they knew. The hive mind had been watching and learning from every human attack. They had adapted their defenses and concentrated everything around their most vital asset. "The Constitution and Liberty are moving to attack positions," reported Communications Officer Dave Wilson. "Captain Martinez says they're going to clear us a path." Through the viewscreen, Bradley watched as two of humanity's finest warships accelerated toward the nest ship's defensive perimeter. Both captains knew it was a suicide run. Their job wasn't to survive, but to draw enemy fire and create an opening for the Vigilant to slip through. The Constitution opened fire first, her railguns sending tungsten rods into the nest ship's outer defenses. Immediately, hundreds of bioweapons turned toward her, firing streams of acid and plasma that ate through her hull like tissue paper. But Captain Martinez kept his ship moving forward, even as sections of it melted away around him. The Liberty came in from the other side, launching every missile she had at the defensive installations. Captain Rodriguez's ship lasted maybe 30 seconds before enemy fire tore her apart, but those 30 seconds were enough to destroy a dozen weapon clusters. "Sir," Wilson said quietly, "Captain Martinez is broadcasting on all frequencies. He says to tell his wife he loves her." Bradley watched the Constitution disappear in a ball of fire, taking a massive section of the nest ship's defenses with her. 200 good people had just died to give the Vigilant a chance. "All hands, this is the captain," Bradley announced over the ship's intercom. "We're going in. It's been an honor serving with all of you." The Vigilant dove toward the gap in the defenses, her engines pushed far beyond safe limits. Enemy fire erupted around them as the hive mind realized what was happening. Bradley felt the ship shudder as projectiles tore through the hull, but they kept moving forward. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported Johnson. "We're losing atmosphere." "Seal it off." "How much further to the core?" 2 kilometers, sir." "Almost there." The ship's gravity failed as they penetrated deeper into the nest ship, but the crew stayed at their stations. Bradley could see the core now, a massive pulsing brain the size of a city block, surrounded by millions of nerve pathways that connected it to the rest of the hive mind. "Johnson, take us right into the center of that thing." "Sir, the hull won't survive the impact." "It doesn't need to survive. Just get us close enough." The Vigilant crashed through the organic barriers surrounding the core, her hull tearing apart as crushing gravitational forces tried to destroy her. In the final seconds before impact, Bradley personally carried Dr. Park's weapon to the breach in the hull and threw it into the center of the hive mind's brain. The modified virus spread through the neural network like wildfire. The Vraktar Collective had no natural defenses against Earth diseases. Within minutes, the connections between billions of minds began to break down. As the hive mind died, its final message echoed across subspace on all frequencies. Human communications officers throughout the fleet heard the same confused question, transmitted in hundreds of languages: "Why do you choose death over defeat?" It was a question the collective would never understand. The Vraktar absorbed other beings to become stronger. They saw defeat as simply another form of absorption, another step in their endless growth. But humans were different. When facing impossible odds, they didn't surrender or join their enemies. They chose to fight even if it meant dying. 3 days later, Admiral Morrison stood in his office at Luna Station, looking out at the stars. The memorial wall behind him displayed the names of the 1,200 personnel who had died in the battle for New Haven. Good people who had volunteered to save aliens they had never met. Speaker Veltar's crystalline form appeared on the communication screen. Admiral Morrison, the Galactic Council wishes to offer humanity permanent leadership of our combined military forces. Your species has saved us all. How can we ever repay this debt? Morrison was quiet for a moment, thinking about Captain Bradley and all the others who wouldn't be coming home. Then he noticed the blinking lights on his communication panel. 3 more distress calls from other worlds, other civilizations facing threats they couldn't handle alone. Just remember to call us first next time, Morrison said finally. That's what neighbors do.